Welcome to Down the Rabbit Hole Quilts. I'm Tessa, and today we're going to make a sweet little quilt out of 2 blocks. We're going to make it out of this large 23-inch heart block that we're going to make up, and out of this smaller 6.5-inch quilt block. So the first block we're going to work on is the big one. And as you can see, it's got a scrappy look. And so I went ahead and I just chose a lot of pinks from my collection, which I did not have a lot of. It was a struggle. It's not as scrappy as I would have liked it to be because I didn't have that many. I ended up just cutting out of some yardage I had to get it. But I did like the scrappier look a lot better than trying to make it solid. I mean, I can show you a block later on of the solid, but I really think that the scrappier look was much better. The background here, I'm using all the same fabric for the background. You could choose to do that, or you could choose to make that scrappy too by using like different variations of whites or creams or whatever your background is. So first we will make this block, and then we will make this block, and then we will put them all together, and we're going to add a border and some corner blocks. So let's go. Now the big block is comprised of half square triangles made of 6-inch squares and 5.5-inch squares. So out of my scraps, I cut a bunch of 6-inch squares of different ones. Like I said earlier, I wish I had more variety, but I just don't have a lot of pinks in my fabric collection, and I was trying to do this out of what I had in my fabric collection. So I'm going to put the link in where I got the block from, and it will tell you how many you need to cut of everything, and so I'm not going to go into all of that. And then out of those, you will also, the same ones, you will also need to cut 5.5. Now the 5.5 are going to end up being these full size pieces in here, and the 6-inch are going to be paired up with a 6-inch white, and they are going to become half square triangles, and I'll show you how we do that in the event you've never done that before. So let's go ahead and we'll get started with making our half square triangles. So let's start making the half square triangles, and they're comprised of a 6-inch colored fabric piece and a 6-inch background piece. And there are many ways to do this. I happen to just like to draw the lines on. So I start by putting my center line and marking it with a removable pen, and then I move it over just a quarter to make my sewing line. Flip it around, mark my other sewing line, and then line them up and pin them together so they don't shift. I'm sure there's faster ways to do this. This just happens to be the way I'm most comfortable with, so I'm showing it. But you can see the middle line is our cutting line, and the 2 outside lines are stitching lines. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch those up and show you what it looks like, and then we'll move on to the next step. All right, so I sewed on either side of the center line, which is kind of hard to see because it's white. Maybe you can see a little better on the back. And now I am just going to remove the pins, and I am going to use my rotary cutter and just cut right down that middle line I drew. And now I have 2 half square triangles that are just a little bit over 5.5, and we're going to trim them to 5.5 once we press them. Once we press them, they will look like this. And then I'm just going to go ahead and trim this one down. I'm just going to line up along the center line and trim off. And you'll see there's not much at all that you end up trimming off. I mean, it's very minute amounts, but it does make a difference when you're putting those blocks together. So there we go. We have our first, or one of our first 5.5 inch half square triangle blocks. And we're going to go ahead and start laying out the heart block. And we'll see what else we need to trim up to make this happen. But we start by doing 2 half square triangles going this way. We're going to form the peak of 1 of the hearts, and then the bumps on it, and then we have a second one here. And you know what, I'm going to have to trim up some more real quick here. I know it's not the proper way to trim and to be cutting towards you like that, but somehow it always ends up, it seems like I end up doing that. And I just be careful. I should have my rotating mat out, but I don't. So anyway, you can see you're not going to have a lot trimmed off. It's a very tiny bit. Now we'll go ahead and put that here, and we've got the 2 bumps on our heart. And then our next row is going to be comprised of 5.5 inch squares. And I just chose them randomly, whatever, you know, I thought looked good. I'm going to have to switch that out. I got a duplicate. I'm not real fan of that, so I'll swap that out here in a few minutes. And then down at the next row, we're also going to have 2 5-inch squares. So let me see what else I got here that we might be able to use. Maybe a solid. And then in these spots, we're going to need one of those 5.5 inch half square triangles that's been trimmed up. And we'll go ahead and put this one here for now. And then our next row, or our last row, is 2 background pieces that are 5.5. And then we will need 2 more half square triangles. And I need to trim some more up, but I'm going to lay these on just so you can see how it would look. And you can change them around, you know, to make them look however you want it to look. So there's the basic layout of the heart. So you can see it's just really the half square triangle and then the 5.5 inch blocks, the solids. And then we'll start putting them together in twos, row by row. So the first row we'll just take and flip this over and sew a 1/4 inch seam. Take this one, flip it over, sew a 1/4 inch seam. Be careful that you match the points so they come together very nice. Same thing with the next row. We'll flip them over and sew and so forth. So let me go ahead and get those sewn together, and so you can see what the next step will be. Here is the finished block all joined together, and as you can see, it makes a beautiful block. It's a very large block. I believe it's 23 inches square, so that's quite big. Like I said earlier, I did this scrappy. I like that much better. I did promise to show you what that block would look like if it was made all in one color. And here is the single color. Now it's pretty, and I have plans to use that block, and I can show you how I'm going to use it later on at the end of the video, but right now I have opted to go with this scrappy look. So my quilt is going to have 6 of these blocks, and I've only got 3 done, so I'm going to do 3 more. And then we're going to start work on the next block, which is the small heart block, which will fit in between all these big blocks. So I've gotten all 6 of the big blocks done. I don't know if you can see the bottom 2, but there are 3 and 3. And now we're going to work on the small heart blocks that will go in between right here. These will be 6-inch finished blocks, and are very small. I mean, they're like, you can use scraps definitely to make these small blocks. And I'm going to show you how to do this next. So to start, we're going to have, you need 2 3.5 by 6.5 inch rectangles. And they don't have to be the same. You could be scrappy just like the rest of the hearts. We need 2 3.5 by 3.5 squares, and we need 4 1.25 inch by 1.25 inch squares. So we're going to start off by marking these from point to point, so right in half like we did with the half square triangles. And then we're going to sew them right sides together, one facing this way and one facing this way. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we will add the little corner pieces. So I've got them sewed on. I just sewed right on the lines, and now we need to trim that, and we're going to trim to within 1/4 inch of the line we just sewed. And we're going to the bottom side of it because we're just going to remove that section. We'll do the other one. And then we will be pressing these like this. And you can see we're starting to form the heart shape like that. Now we're going to take these little 1.25 inch squares and we're going to sew them up here at the top right on their lines that we marked. One going this way, one going that way. Same thing on the other side. It's going to form the humps on the heart at the top. So I'm going to go ahead and sew those on and trim them, and then I will connect the two pieces together. All right, so I sewed the little corners on, and then I went ahead and I just took my scissors and I just trimmed within approximately 1/4 of an inch of my sewing line. And I went ahead and I pressed it. And then on the same thing on the other side, I trimmed them and I pressed them. So we have two halves going on right here. And now we just need to join them. And when I join them, I make sure to match up my sewing lines and my points down there, because otherwise you're not going to get points coming together. And a lot of times we'll line them up and then I'll stick a pin going the direction of the diagonal line, and we'll do the same thing up at the top, lining them up, putting a pin there, and then I'll probably add just a couple more because I want to make sure it's stable. It's a small piece, so it's easy for it to, you know, get out of whack. So I've got them sewed together. I'm going to go ahead and sew that center seam, and we'll take a look at our block. So here's the block all finished. It's just really cute. It's currently 6.5 inches square. Finished it will be 6 inches square. That's what I've chosen for it to be. I do have, this was a free pattern online, and I will put the link down in the description so that you can get to it, but it gives everywhere from a 4-inch to a 10-inch heart. And I'm just going to start adding mine. To where I'm planning for them to be. So I've got 3 more I need to finish up, and then we'll start working on the sashing and the borders. All the 6.5 inch blocks are complete, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2 in the bottom corners you can't see. So now it's time to start adding our sashing. I do need to make a correction. My blocks are 20 and 3/8. They are not 23 inches. I was looking at the wrong number, and so I just want to correct that. My sashing here is the same width as my block. So this was 6.5 inch unfinished. So these are 6.5 inch unfinished by whatever your blocks are. So if your blocks end up being 20 1/4, then you will want to cut them 20 1/4. And if they're like mine are 20 and 3/8, or yeah, 3/8. So that's how long I cut mine. So my plan is to put the 6.5 inch between the blocks, and then to run, to run a 2.5 inch border around the outside, just to kind of cap off everything. And then we're going to add a second border around the outside that'll be scrappy. So I'm going to go ahead, sew the entire center together, and then we'll come back and talk about how we're going to do the borders. The sashes, the 6.5 inch sash pieces, have been added in here and here. And then I went ahead, and there is a 2.5 inch white border all the way around. I just kind of wanted to cap everything off and finish it so you could really see the hearts. And now I decided to go ahead and start putting the border on. And as you can see, I already have the side borders on. And the side borders are what is left of the scraps I have. They are 2.5 by 6.5 inch pieces that I have sewed together in random order. I decided on the 2.5 by 6.5 because these blocks right here that are also going to be in the corners are 6.5 inch blocks. So I needed to be able to match up. So this is, I've got the two sides on, and I'm going to start putting the top and the bottom on. And I've sewed together the top piece or the bottom, doesn't matter at this point. And then I'm going to attach a couple of these hearts to either end, and I'm going to go ahead and sew it on. Now, if your hearts, if you chose to do a bigger heart that was 7.5 or a smaller heart that was only 4.5, then just adjust your borders accordingly. The top border's on. Isn't that cute? So, I need to make the bottom border, but I did want to go back. Mine across here, these are 2.5-inch strips, and it ended up that I needed 25 of these sewn together in order to make the top, and then my side ones, there are 38 on. This is actually a pretty good size quilt, and I wanted it that way because it is going to go to my granddaughter, who is 6, and she loves colors like pink and purple. So I didn't have purple to do in it, but I did have some pink, and so I'm going to go ahead and construct the bottom border. And like I said before, it's just made up of strips like this, and I'm just going to sew them together in pairs. In this case, I will have 12 pairs plus one extra, and I've just got a pile here. It's going to be a random thing, and then I will add on the last 2 hearts, and we'll see how it looks. All right, borders are on, as you can see, and it looks a little different now because I went ahead and I finished it off, and I quilted it with a design by Ann Bright, and I will put down in the description what that pattern is. I went ahead and I put Minky on the back of this beautiful pink, hot pink fuchsia color. Super cool, super soft. My granddaughter will love it. And the reason I did this is because a lot of times you ask me, how would you finish that? And so this is how I would finish a quilt like this. Now this quilt is a twin size quilt. It is approximately 64 inches wide by 49 or 90 inches long, I believe. Anyway, it's a twin size quilt, so it's a big quilt, and it will fit her bed, and it will be a nice bedspread for her. So I hope you enjoyed making the pieces of My Heart Quilt. Now, I did tell you that I would show you what we were going to do with this block, this little orphan block that I made initially all in one color. And I am going to do a separate video just for that and the finishing of that. So stay tuned for that to come out in the near future. But I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.